Herman Melton, local historian, industrial historian, who is going to be looking with us at the question of the Fitzgerald Mill down on Banister River, which was at the site of the fish weir, which was my first interest in going to this location on the Banister River, which we will be seeing in a few minutes. Mr. Melton, would you make a few comments on milling in Pittsylvania County at the time that this mill was built and why you're interested in going down to that site?
Well, sure. This is just on the threshold of the golden age of milling in Pennsylvania County. It reached its peak about 1840, water-powered grist mills. They're more in 1840 than any time after or before.
So you're saying that the Fitzgerald Mill was...
earlier, a little earlier than the peak, but it was at the time when there were in great profusion in the county.
And we're talking 1830, basically.
Yeah, 1820s and 30s, sure. And to me, any mill on the Banister River has a special fascination for one reason. It was controversial. Not many places in the county, if you went to build a grist mill, did you have controversy or objections. Because generally it meant more convenience for you if somebody built a grist mill closer to you. But in this case, a controversy arose in as early as 1790 about mills on the Banister, because if there's one axiom that endures, and that is that ship channels and grist mill dams do not mix.
In other words, you can't bring bateaus or ships very well up the river if you got dams every few miles or something.
That's right, and that's why you won't find as many mills on the Banister River as you do other streams in Pennsylvania County. There are streams like Sandy River has 12 or 15 grist mill sites. It's a much smaller river than the Banister. At least it's well, I say shorter. Anyway, there are other streams smaller that have fewer grist mills. Anyway, more grist mills than the Banister did. But this controversy erupted into a political election in the General Assembly in 1792. William Clark owned the grist mill. It was now Motley's mill. It's now the biggest grist mill in the county as far as volume and size goes.
Now, Motley's mill sits right across the White Oak Mountain from Spring Garden.
That's right, yeah.
There on the way to Chatham.
649.
649.
Very close to the game reserve.
Right.
But that mill was built in 1788, but it was Colonel Clark didn't buy it for a few years. He bought it around 1788, 1790, something like that. And I guess it was built in 1785. He bought it in 1789. Anyway, he had no sooner bought it than Henry Clay's uncle, who's Matthew Clay, the famous Henry Clay of Kentucky, was one of his antecedents, was a prominent politician here in Pennsylvania County. He lived at Chestnut Level. And he was a member of the House of Delegates. And he introduced a bill, or co-introduced it in the General Assembly, to clear the Banister of all obstructions. Now, Mr. Mitchell, that meant fish weirs, that meant grist mill dams, and any kind of diversion, so that you could navigate it. And another reason for it, though, was that dams at that time were not equipped with fish ladders. And you see, the shad was spawning up the Banister. This was another reason. This was the big reason. And in the petition of people presented to the General Assembly to remove grist mills from the river, was that it was affecting the migration of the shad, and which was a fish that was all the way up along the coast. And anyway, so you had the people who wanted for navigation. People wanted to float their tobacco down the river, you see, on rafts. And there were navigation companies that were even talking about building. There was a company founded, the Upper Banister River Navigation Company. And they were opposed to grist mills. Okay.
Well, you mentioned the shad run up the Banister River.
Yeah.
Would you suppose that is why there are so many fish weirs in the river? Do you think that had to do with the shad run itself?
I suspect it did. I would think so.
So the Native Americans were trying to work off that shad run each year.
Yeah, and they could the shad could go above that fish weir if he wanted to. You know? Right. But they need to be caught on the way down.
That's right. Well, according to the way Mr. Stone tells it, we'll hear from him a little bit later. The weirs were designed to catch the fish on the way back down the river.
Yes, sir.
So that's beginning to make a little bit more sense now,
Yeah.
and we'll see a little bit of that
Yeah.
later. Okay, apparently since we have several fish weirs in the Banister now, apparently that law was never enforced.
It wasn't enforced. There was so much opposition to it, and Colonel Clark led the opposition. He and some others, and of course it got to be a violent, just virulent language, and he accused Matthew Clay of forging petitions, and Clay took him to court and won. It was settled out of court, but the county records show it being appealed and taken to Bedford County. Well, first it went to Franklin, we appealed from there to Bedford County, and then it was tried there, and Clay won. He proved it. And by the way, that pamphlet that Clark handed out is in a British museum. It's also in the broadsides.
The broadsides then were for the clearing of the.
Well, that pamphlet was opposed to the clearing of the Banister River. Yeah.
All right.
So when you speak about mill and Banister, that's why I'm fascinated.
Okay. Well, we're going to go out to the mill. We're going to cut in just a second here to our